Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Frontier Indica podcast. This is going to be a fairly casual session, but I do have a few topics in mind which I'd like to speak about. Now, I know that I haven't done one of these in quite some time, but I was kind of caught up with some other stuff, but here we are now. I do have some time. So let's get rolling. So, firstly, I'll talk about a few things which have been in the news recently, and people obviously have generated a lot of their own opinions about it based on often, half-assed facts and limited information which they get from the mainstream media. And these days, even most of social media is quite partisan. One of these, obviously, is what is currently going on in Pakistan, for instance. Right now, obviously, we have not historically had friendly relations with that country, and they all, on the other hand, of course, have always painted us as the kind of like the great Satan, the embodiment of all evil is India for them. It has been, at least historically, and I think still that view probably persists in the common person's mind there. Here, also the reaction to that has been pretty much the same. Of course, it is no doubt true that we've also come to see China as a major rival. Even though as many of you know who follow me on Twitter, you might know that I personally stand against that viewpoint, because to be a great rival to any country, right, you at least need to match them in certain spheres, right? Like, but I mean, any major domain you take, any major sphere you take, I don't think we're anywhere close to the Chinese. Again, and even with the Pakistan India comparison, it's an unfair, it's an illogical comparison, because if you look at for example, the size of the two countries' economies, right? Like, I don't think Pakistan's GDP is more than 1/8 or 1/7 or something of India's. I might be off with the exact fractions here, but it's hardly the size of, let's say, I don't know, maybe Maharashtra or Karnataka's economy or something. Or probably uh, the gap is lesser when we compare the demographics, but still it is at this point of time a substantially poorer country. Of course, the not to the extent that we are substantially, relative to the gap which exists between China and India. Obviously, the gap is much less, right? So, if you look at, let's say, Eastern India, or certain parts of North India, certain parts of the Hindi heartland, they probably are in a similar stage of development, in a similar stage of economic growth, uh, as let's say, even Pakistan's most prosperous provinces, or some of our really backward provinces, are on a similar scale as some of their more prosperous provinces. So, in that sense, I don't think that there's any reason to be really happy that they're doing so terribly and this that. I mean, obviously, it's been several years. We've already left them substantially behind, but the fact remains that if you look at the gap that there exists between China and India, the gap is much greater. And obviously, if we just want to play the regional power, then of course, yeah, you can say with gusto, yeah, we left those Pakistanis behind, and we are a great power and this and that. But on the global scale, we're still really punching below our weight, and really not anywhere close to our actual potential, and especially given the size of the number of people, we've really done a great disservice to what we've been endowed with in terms of human capital and a bunch of other things. But anyways, let's look at the facts. I think what I read recently was that Pakistan's foreign exchange reserves have been down to around $5 billion or something like that. And if you look at India's foreign exchange reserves, I think it's well above 500 billion or 600 billion. So there's no comparison at all. It's like 100x, right? So if our economy is 7-8x theirs, our foreign exchange reserves are like 100x. So there is, I mean, obviously no comparison to be made there. the country seems to have had, like, from what I've read, like what Pakistani economists and international commentators themselves, like, say, is that the country has been really spending and splurging on the wrong things, right? Like lot of the country's elite has really been robbing their coffers, kind of in similar fashion to what happens in most countries in the Indian subcontinent and much of the third world. There is a very strong elite cohort which robs everyone blind, often through very legal mechanisms. And apparently the corruption situation there is a lot worse than what we have back here at home in India. So what we've seen is that the elites there have basically mismanaged the entire economy, and the army has played a very outsized role in how the country has been run. Right now, one major factor for that behind that is obviously in if you're a country with your mortal enemy, which is 6-7 times bigger than you in terms of its population, and then 8-10 times bigger than you, let's say, in terms of other metrics, then obviously the military is going to end up playing a very very vital role and extract a lot more resources from the economy than it would otherwise, right? And it's kind of like a circular thing. It's a downward spiral. The more power that the military has, the more economic resources it extracts from the rest of the economy, and the less of a the less of a system of checks and balances exists to check the power of the military and to kind of make sure that at least, even if those economic resources are being extracted, at least they're not being splurged on unnecessary expenses, and they're actually, if it's meant for military use, it's actually going to military use. But we've seen the case. It's been happening since decades that senior Pakistani officers are riding around in luxury German cars, Mercedes and what Mercedes Benz and whatnot, while the common population has an extremely low, like ownership rate of like any motor vehicles, right? Not just cars, but even like motorbikes and scooters and whatnot. So we kind of see that the army and the landed aristocratic elite which has existed traditionally there have played an outsized role in the running of the economy and the political affairs of the country, and that has caused a downward spiral where they've been spending more than their economic actually permits, right? And they've also gotten spoiled over the last few decades because of what's called the war on terror, right? Obviously the US needed an ally proximate to Afghanistan when they were running the war there, and Pakistan was obviously able to piggyback on that ride as well. And the Chinese have also been pretty generous with them, and since the Gulf countries don't have any nuclear weapons of their own, and they're always kind of scared about Iran and the Shia Crescent, there's also been this entire tide of money and often like no holds barred aid coming from Gulf countries into Pakistan, which is obviously not used for the most part, not used for any productive purposes, but just siphoned off and probably ends up in London or Switzerland or wherever. So, again, very similar to what happens here, but obviously, not so blatantly, not so unchecked as happens there, because again, levers of power have historically been much more concentrated in a few hands compared to what's been happening in India. So again, now I believe Pakistan is due for a general election this year, and from what I have observed is that since the common man on the street is suffering from inflation, which has been much worse even compared to the highest rate of inflation during the Imran Khan regime, I think there is a very very strong tide of anti-incumbency against the government of Mr. Shehbaz Sharif, and all his I guess brothers and nieces and nephews and all those people who are in power. And of course, my main man Bilawal, that man actually makes Rahul Gandhi look like a true intellectual, and of course Modi ji as well. Modi ji is probably Einstein compared to that chap, of course. But all jokes apart, I don't think that shoddy job of a coalition which is opposing the PTI, if the elections do happen in a largely free and fair manner, would have a chance at returning to power. And so we could really see a lot of political turmoil in the run up to their general elections. And from the looks of it, apparently we have not even seen the worst of their economic crisis till now. So one interesting thing which I've noticed is, and this is something which a lot of people in these Pakistani circles are talking, how the economic mismanagement is hurting the common man. Apparently, and a lot of people in the Pakistani diaspora. Now, Pakistan is a country which has been extremely dependent on remittances sent by diaspora Pakistanis, right? Because if you look at as a proportion of the Pakistani population, they have a much greater percentage of the population which is settled abroad, like primarily in Anglo countries like the UK, Canada, Australia, etc., etc. But as a proportion, they're quite a sizable number of the total Pakistani population. Compared to them, we actually have relatively few like Indians who live abroad, like relative to the size of our population, right? So the fact is that, and plus their economy being a lot smaller and being less developed compared to us, they are extremely heavily dependent on these remittances to run things and pay for imports and maintain at least like relative to how badly their the rupee in Pakistan, the Pakistani rupee is doing right now, maintains some semblance of stability towards with respect to international currencies like the US dollar, the euro, pound, etc., etc. But apparently, what's happened is that the rupee has apparently depreciated at a much faster rate than we even know through official sources, right? So apparently there is almost a 30-40 rupee difference between what the black market or the gray market will pay you in Pakistan for each dollar and how much you will get from official channels. So for example, let's say, I'm not sure what the exact rate is right now, but I believe $1 in the official market will fetch you around 225 230 Pakistani rupees. And if you try to buy Pakistani rupees from let's say a gray market or a black market dealer, right, completely unofficial, the unofficial rate is apparently a lot higher, like 260 270 rupees, something like that. And a lot of people, when they're paying through their credit cards and stuff on international websites, apparently they're also being charged similar rates, like 260 265, rather than the official peg, which is 225 230. And that is something which is extremely worrying for any country, because we've seen this previously happen in countries which have had very heavy sanctions placed on them. For example, Iran is an obvious example where the official rate was completely Iran and Lebanon as well. Lebanon, in fact, more recently, where the official rate was actually fairly stable, but the real inflation which was happening on the ground, the real deterioration of the foreign exchange rate of I believe is the Iranian Rial, they call it Iranian Rial, or if I'm not if I'm not wrong, there's another term for it which they have locally. I don't really recall it right now. Maybe I'll just I guess Google it or something. But okay, let's just leave that for later. But anyways, it basically points to a severe deterioration of the economic situation, because when you have 2-3 different rates playing at the same time, what is happening is that official market players are getting to buy forex for cheap, and then but when they're selling it, right, so this is another interesting thing. So when you are let's say, so in for example in Pakistan, when you're selling your US dollars or euros or something for local Pakistani rupees, right, you're selling it for let's say what, 225, 230. But when you are trying to buy through the same official channels, when you're trying to buy US dollars or euros or whatever, you're actually paying that 30, 40 rupee premium. So it's not that the official channels are not ripping you off, the official channels are ripping you off as well, right? So they are making that insane spread on selling and buying forex from their own citizens, and that they're ripping them off, and God knows where that profit ends up, right? And if you imagine, if you're someone who's running a businessman, what their government has done is that they've placed a lot of restrictions on imports, right? So the hilarious thing is that apparently the army, their military, is still importing these luxury cars from Germany and all these places. And but the common businessmen who actually need raw materials and ingredients to produce certain goods, or even to import, let's say, certain necessary manufactured items, right, final finished goods, they are not able to use letters of credit to pay off for those supplies, right? Because apparently the permissions are not being granted, and all of this is being done apparently to stop the rupee depreciating further, so that more forex does not go out of the country. But again, like, for any economics, anyone who knows like basic economics will tell you this is a completely uh, foolish and short-sighted thing to do. In the long run, it whatever little manufacturing you have, whatever little consumption and demand which you have in the economy, you're basically destroying all of that. You're killing thousands and tens of, literally tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of jobs, right? And obviously that again also creates a downward spiral where there is less demand. So, and plus the supply is already constricted by this lack of supplies, foreign imports, so they are not even able to supply. And overall it's essentially just bad things going to worse, and worse things becoming like a total nightmare. So apparently that's what's happening in Pakistan. I'm sure like Imran Khan is no economic genius himself, but whatever it is, I think the very fact that if he comes to power on his own, and if he has that public mandate, he would probably be a lot less dependent on the army for support, and in fact could also curtail the army's taste for luxury, perhaps to some extent, and at least avoid the total economic mismanagement which has happened under the recent dispensation under the Sharifs and the what is this chap's name, man? Bilawal, that guy, it always makes me crack up looking at his face. But yeah, that's apparently what's been happening in Padosi Mulk. So I don't know if they're gonna. I don't think they're gonna collapse. I really hope not, because that's going to lead to a lot of trouble on our own borders, right? So the problem with Pakistan, as they say, is that a stable Pakistan is a really bad neighbor to have, but an unstable Pakistan is an even bigger nightmare apparently. So, and what else has been happening? I think oh yeah, this is a bit silly, but apparently all these people on social media and a bunch of other places are talking about Anant Ambani's marriage to, so I think some lady called Radhika Merchant, and I think obviously both of them extremely wealthy families, and they're doing all these synchronized dances and choreographed steps on, I think, the ring ceremony and engagement and all that stuff, right? First of all, obviously, I mean, it's just two people getting married, but since they're loaded, then it does get a lot of media attention. But one thing which I don't get why people keep on harping about is Anant Ambani being fat and cracking all those fat jokes. Oh, his wife will not desire him at all, and whatnot. I think people have a really lopsided and a really out of touch view about how human, I think, sexuality and human relationships work, right? Obviously, physical attractiveness is one angle which does play to both sexes. It's not that women do not want a guy who is ripped and has good facial features and not a tall fat dude, but that looks, again, like physical attractiveness, again, it's primarily a male thing, right? It is by your very biological nature, it is something that you're looking in a female partner. That's your number one thing, right? Like, that's your bare minimum, and anything on top of that, if she's well educated, comes from a good family which has money and prestige, all of that is like extra. That's extra cherry on top. But for women, it doesn't work exactly in that same order. The order for them, I think, first of all, is status, then status slash confidence. I think status, then probably confidence and personality and all that, and probably physical attractiveness would be pretty important, but its weightage would be much less compared to how much female beauty matters to men. I think the weightage, let's say, if men are choosing a partner, would be 50-60% outright for just physical attractiveness. For women, I think it's probably not going to be more than 20%, 25% or something. Like, I think these are just figures off the top of my head. I mean, there's no way to quantify it, but yeah, people forget that. Like, I mean, if your father is like literally, one of, I think he's the second richest man in the country right now, behind Jahapana Adani ji, Paindabad. Uh, Behind Adani ji, he is the second richest man, and he might be again the richest in the country again, or even if he's not, he's still got a ton of money, right? And that amount of money can buy like literally thousands of the prettiest virgin maidens and super yachts and entire islands and literally entire countries for his son, if he so wishes, right? And that's just how the reality of the world is, and I think no sane woman is going to be so perturbed. And again, and the thing is that guy, if you look at some of his previous pictures, he's not always been like a total fat. So there have been some periods where you see that he's relatively lean and he looks like a, I mean, he still kind of has that typical Vishwaguru dad bod, but again, he wasn't exactly obese, right? So this is again a pretty temporary state. I think if he has the willpower and if he really, really so wishes, I mean, it's probably like it'll take him like, again, what, 6 months, 7 months, 8 months to get back into decentish shape. So it's again a temporary thing, the looks part of it, right? And no woman who is sane, in this country or anywhere else, is going to reject or feel disgusted by him just because of his temporary lack of physical attractiveness, when he is coming from a family with that incredible amount of wealth, power, status, prestige, and everything, right? He checks literally all the boxes except for the fact that he's a fat guy. But again, he has so much money that it doesn't really matter. So yeah, that's the latest gossip, guys. Uh, what else? I can't really think of too much apart from this. Of course, BJP has been doing its thing. They've been pushing for higher and higher quotas. BJP Karnataka, I think a few weeks back, basically proposed that Karnataka should have private sector quotas. And if you remember, they passed certain legislation or ordinance or something in Haryana where they actually, made that law that there should be quotas in the private sector in Haryana, but obviously like below a certain limit. I think the limit was 40,000 or 50,000. So any jobs which private sector companies are creating, right? So they have to, if the job pays less than 50,000 bucks a month, then a certain percentage of those jobs have to go to Haryana domiciles. Now, I think this is a pretty ridiculous idea. I don't even think they've actually managed to implement it. And again, even if they try it in Karnataka, there's no way that like IT companies and even other industries can really survive with just local labor, right? Because local labor obviously will come at a premium, and that's going to majorly cut into your profit margins. And obviously, there is no way for the government. The government itself does not even have the state capacity to exactly figure out if the jobs are going to Karnataka domiciles or if they're going to someone from UP. There is no way to really implement such a law. So I think it's again just an eye wash before elections. The more troubling thing, obviously, is the push for caste census and push for higher OBC quotas, higher SC/ST quotas. Again, that's the main problem is not just the fact that it's cutting into a lot of good jobs for people who are categorized as general category, but the bigger problem is that it really destroys the governance machinery, right? you know when you have, let's say, a contract dispute, or let's say a petty criminal case also, even that thing can drag on for so long because the local level justice system is just so trash. And obviously, like, if you are picking people on the basis of what their surname is or which caste they come from ancestrally, then that tends to compound those problems. I'm not saying that if you had a entire if if forward castes in a free and fair system made up the bulk, the or not even the bulk, if they were let's say doing 90-95% of these local level administrative and justice jobs, that will have a complete paradise or something. Obviously there'll be huge problems still. There are other elements to this, but why make a bad situation worse, right? Why, if your system already is so bad, why compound the problems by hiring, by further destroying competence and further compromising on the merits of candidates which you select for these positions? But again, that is politics. So, and that's been happening for decades now. I don't think it's going to stop. Plus, if there's a caste census, a lot of people will be very, very surprised what an incredibly small minority forward castes are. We are, absolutely not the majority. So this entire rhetoric of majoritarian sovereign politics and all of that, that's absolute nonsense. We are a minority ourselves. We make up a very, very small percentage of the total population, and we are increasingly getting disenfranchised from a lot of levels of power, from a lot of well-paying government jobs, which don't just pay well, but obviously also come with a certain amount of social prestige and influence. So we are increasingly being disenfranchised from those opportunities. And even the private sector isn't doing so well. It's not that the private sector is creating like a gazillion jobs or something that it's going to make up for it. So yeah, but that is Vishwaguru India. That is what it is, my friends. So as I've generally maintained, for a lot of people, I think in this country, especially if you don't come from a background where you have local connections and you have a lot of capital, I think the best option is just to move out. If you don't have that, if you're rich and influential, probably you can still make it here. But otherwise, if unless you're like literally in this top 0.1% of talent, things are going to get more tough here. That's what I really think is going to happen. So anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. I'll shut this thing now and catch you again soon, hopefully. Bye bye.